ultimate insider. At least till a few months ago, Subhash Chandra Garg, the Economic Affairs Secretary, was in charge of the now infamous July 2019 budget. He was transferred out soon after and subsequently resigned. He has now penned a blog where he claims the fiscal deficit for the last financial year was a full 1 percentage point higher than what was reported in official data. Speaking to me now about these revelations is Mr. Secy Garg, former Economic Affairs Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Garg, for speaking with us. Fiscal deficit is the biggest mystery of all. What is the actual number according to you? Can you elaborate on that?
So, I think there are two ways to look at it. One, what the headline fiscal deficit, which is to be compared with what the number of 3.3% is, and the real or the total fiscal deficit. So, the conventional fiscal deficit of 3.3, given what the performance of the tax revenues and the non-tax side, including disinvestment and the dividends from the Reserve Bank and all, everything is concerned, that is likely to see a shortfall around 2 lakh crores in all, maybe slightly lower, 25,000 crores here and there. So, depending upon that concept, the likely headline fiscal deficit may be somewhere close to 4% is that is the one number. The second thing is that some of the expenditures and the investments which the government does are not treated or included in this conventional or headline fiscal deficit number. That is the expenditure like the expenditure on toilets, on housing schemes and others, which is paid through the fully serviced bonds, which are shown as a separate statement in the budget papers, or the food subsidy paid through NSSF and all. If we take that into account, that's another about 2 lakh crores, so roughly close to 1% of GDP. So that would be a total measure of fiscal deficit, which is what I've stated might be in total about 4.7 to 5% of GDP.
Okay, I'd like to now ask you how you see the picture unfolding forward. Now, you had a crucial role to play in the July budget. Things have changed drastically since then. It almost seemed that, you know, the economic situation started unraveling after that budget. Looking at the situation right now, what can be realistically done?
So, the biggest factor which has in a way led to what you described as the unraveling of the budget has been the surprising slowdown which nobody expected and anticipated. The growth was expected to be about 11% of GDP in nominal terms. It has turned out to be around 7.5%. And that has implications for your tax revenues and everything else, and also the demand for more expenditure and concessions. So that is what has been the biggest factor responsible for some of the unraveling which you're describing in the budget. Now, going forward, I think the biggest event or the factor which probably need to be taken into account in the context of budgeting is the FRBM mandate, which requires the fiscal deficit to be brought down to 3%, the conventional fiscal deficit to 3%. I think that is an impossibility given the need of the economy and the fact of fiscal deficit running very high. You can't cut it down by a percentage of GDP in a year or so, and therefore how do we treat the fiscal deficit roadmap from to 2021 is, to my mind, from the budgeting point of view, one of the biggest factors to be taken into account. It might and should make sense in my judgment to bring every thing which is outside the budget onto budget and then restart on a clean slate If it is 4.5%, one can then adopt a program for next few years to bring it down to 3% over a period of, let's say, 4 or 5 years. So that's one of the biggest one. The economy needs massive dose of investment, because investment is what will kickstart the growth. Consumption is relatively, to my mind, a lesser factor in sort of building the momentum for long-term growth, and therefore I think that's what need to be attended. And in my judgment, the most lasting and sustaining element for boosting growth or the investment is the private sector investment. So what policy measures we take to ignite or restart the growth momentum in private sector would be the most watched out element in the budget.
You know, some of the commentary which is coming in right now, considering the fiscal deficit numbers, and you say it's even higher, is let's forget about the target for a bit and focus on growth. Let's boost growth. Is that the way to go, in your opinion?
See, you can never forget the fiscal deficit or the budget balance whenever you try to stimulate growth, right? Any time you have done it, it leads to a lot of distress in the economy later on. You can never sort of borrow your way to sustainable growth. We have had most recent episode in this respect has been the episode in 2008-9 to 2012-13, when large fiscal deficits were run to stimulate the economy, and see what happened. 2 or 3 years of very high inflation, distress in the economy, and finally the growth collapsing. This has happened earlier in 80s also, and many and some more times in our history. So I would very, very strongly advise anybody suggesting that you can inflate your way or you can go back to higher growth by building expenditures on very large borrowings, sort of ignoring fiscal deficit. So I don't think that's the sustainable way at all.
Yeah. You know, the other big commentary right now and narrative right now is the slowdown in consumption. Most experts agree that the overall economic slowdown is coming in large part because of a drop in consumption. Can the government really do anything to kickstart or boost consumption in the budget?
See, consumption is sustainably sort of restored or brought about by ensuring that people's income go up, and that income situation also leads people or raises people's propensity to take loans or debt for consumption. You have seen this very closely in the agriculture or the rural areas. For last 2 years, the agriculture prices, commodity prices were so low that the agriculture incomes or the rural incomes had collapsed, which had led to consumption falling down. But this year, when the prices in the agriculture commodities have started looking up, you find the consumption coming back slowly in that area. That's the sustainable way. Whenever it becomes too difficult, like it had happened in the agriculture scene or the rural scene for last 2 years, the government came up with the PM Kisan to provide some more consumption support to people. That's the kind of distress situation where it might be justified for government to provide consumption support. But otherwise, it should be left to be generated by higher incomes brought about by larger investments, which also support credit. I don't think by providing doles or giving too much of tax concessions, we can support consumption sustainably.
So I assume you're not in favor of slashing personal income tax rates?
Personal income taxes, I think, requires to be sort of reviewed for in terms of their slabs. The average incomes or the lowest slab starts too early or too low. Average income of households is much higher. So I think we are starting at a very low level. So it requires relook, but not from the point of view of putting cash into the hands of people, but more from the point of view of racializing the tax rates and reforming the slabs. But one area where I think time has come to take action is to do away with the dividend distribution tax,
right,
and replacing it with the dividend tax in the hands of the recipients.
Yeah.
That will also be, to my mind, revenue neutral, and that reform would also be much helpful from the corporate performance point of view and the investment point of view. So I think that's something which should be and can be considered this time.
As I wrap this interview, Mr. Garg, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions you might find uncomfortable, but I must. As the ultimate insider, in your view, what is the will and capability of this government, this finance ministry, to pull us out of the economic slowdown we find ourselves in?
So I'm not an insider any longer. Whatever I write is based on the published numbers.
Yeah.
There's nothing of the inside. So I don't think I can. I have not interacted with the team for quite some time. So I don't think I am in a position to comment on this.
Well fielded. But you did put out a post after you left government service that your decision did not go down well with the top bosses. Do you think you were the fall guy for the now infamous July budget?
Number one, I don't think July budget is infamous at all. It had lots of good things which are happening. This was a budget where the encouragement to private sector, opening of the foreign investments, a lot of good things were there. Yeah. I would ask you to do a check on how many of those proposals are not implemented. I think a lot of them, something additional has come later on, that's a different matter. And in that note which I released, the decisions I referred was not only the finance ministry decisions, but in my entire career. So that's documented there. So I don't think there was anything exclusive. Only thing which I commented was that it has happened somehow that in finance ministry related postings, both in the state and the center,
yeah,
somehow 2 or 3 postings which I did ended up in little bit unceremonious or not so happy circumstances. But that's not exclusive again of the government of India. There is nothing wrong. It was discussed with me, and the movement to power ministry was entirely with my sort of consent. So there is nothing to be worried about on that front.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time, Mr. Garg, SC Garg there, speaking on the fiscal deficit picture. And I think a big takeaway is his claim that the actual fiscal deficit is much higher. We have a tighter target this time round. Will it be breached, and what is the real figure? Some important questions ahead of the budget.